Science and science fiction-loving adults believe strongly in cultivating and maintaining a sense of curiosity and wonder about the universe. They value optimism and international collaboration, both political, the United Federation of Planets, and scientific. This makes the audience reimagine Seuss's characters as the world's future explorers and scientists, reinscribing Seussian fantasy and fable into the real world of science and politics. This is a community-supported legal education channel. Find out how you can support our mission at the links in the description below. There is an update in the Dr. Seuss Enterprises comic mix lawsuit. This is the "Oh, the Places You'll Boldly Go" lawsuit. This is the appeal to the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, and this is by Dr. Seuss, because of course Comic Mix won at the lower level, and this is the brief of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and once again, public knowledge, because, you know, they write things that are well written, so we want to read things that are well written. And this is presented by Mason A. Quartz at the Cyber Law Clinic of Harvard Law School. So this is not a lightweight brief here, which is why I wanted to bring it to you and thought that maybe we would read about this together. So if you recall, Boldly made use of Star Trek themes, but used the Dr. Seuss "Oh, the Places You'll Go" art style. So imagine if you had an "Oh, the Places You'll Go" book and you opened it up, and wherever you thought you were going to see Dr. Seuss characters, it was Star Trek characters and themes and story, and it was done in an art style that resembled the "Oh, the Places You'll Go." So that's why we're calling it "Oh, the Places You'll Boldly Go." That's why, well, they call it "Oh, the Places You'll Boldly Go." So it was a mashup. It was a mixture of the two things. Definitely transformative, but was it market usurping? Was it a fair use? Was it parody? How do you call this? Let's see what let's see what they have to say. Let's see what the EFF and Public Knowledge have to say. Boldly is a highly transformative work within the meaning of fair use. Transformative works satisfy the first factor of the fair use test. Copyright's fair use doctrine protects the creation of transformative works, or those that add something new with a further purpose or different character, altering the original work with new expression, meaning, or message. That's from Campbell v. Acuff Rose Music. In this way, the law recognizes that artists, thinkers, writers, and creators must have the freedom to build upon existing elements of culture, to create new works, to seek out new life and new civilization, to boldly, I'm getting carried away, that further enrich our society and advance the very purposes of copyright law. Although transformative aspects of remix works like mashups often involve or imply commentary in the underlying works, a remix does not have to comment on the original to be transformative for the purposes of the first fair use factor. This court and other courts have found visual artworks that use prior works as raw material to be transformative even when they fail to comment on or parody the original. For example, this court held that Green Day's use of a black and white illustration of a face frozen mid-scream icon, I guess it's called, as a backdrop for a music video was transformative. The poster was slightly weathered and had been spray painted with a bright red cross. In holding that the use was transformative, this court emphasized the difference between the expressive content and message of the video and Scream Icon. Scream Icon reflected a specific time and culture of Los Angeles, whereas the video had a religious theme. So that was transformative. Second Circuit has similarly held that visual collages, works incorporating other artists' images into unique, cohesive wholes, I think I've talked about this before, were transformative because they changed the expression or aesthetic of the underlying works, right? Carew versus Prince, however you pronounce that, which is a fairly recent case from 2013. Prince, an artist, used photographs of Rastafarians to create a collection of collages. For some of the collages, Prince painted bright objects such as lozenges and an electric blue guitar over the photographs. For others, Prince took bits and pieces of the photographs to create distorted human shapes. The majority of the collages were transformative because the aesthetic differed from that of the original. In Blanche Lynch v. Coons from 2006, the court held that a collage created from photographs of women's legs imposed over a pastoral landscape dotted with scrumptious desserts was transformative. The court commented directly on how original works could serve as raw material writing when, as here, the copyrighted work is used as raw material in the furtherance of distinct creation or communicative objectives. The use is transformative. A close reading of Boldly and Go, within the broader context of the worlds of Star Trek and Dr. Seuss, underscores Boldly's status as a transformative work. The district court in this case correctly concluded that Boldly is a transformative work and makes fair use of elements of Go because Boldly adapts the stylistic, visual, and rhyming elements from Go to create a new expression. A close reading of the works demonstrates that this conclusion was correct. In Boldly, the authors have remixed and remade not a single Dr. Seuss book, but the very idea of Dr. Seuss. Boldly speaks with specificity to thematic elements of Star Trek. It draws out those meanings of Dr. Seuss that resonate with Star Trek fans while adding new meanings that speak with particularity to the themes of Star Trek beloved by its community of fans. Star Trek fandom is indeed a community, as numerous scholarly works have documented, and they name them all. Parents want their kids to share their love of Star Trek with the show's values. Star Trek provides a text that parents can eagerly look forward to sharing with their children, hence the existence of products like Star Trek uniform onesies, plush toys, and crib mobiles. Both the original Star Trek and the works of Dr. Seuss share a wonky 60s vibe. In fact, both Star Trek and the television version of How the Grinch Stole Christmas debuted in 1966. Both texts still feel of that era and appear antiquated to contemporary audiences. Mervyn Nicholson argues that compared to almost all subsequent science fiction, including later iterations of Star Trek, the original series is minimalist, primitive, even quaint, not much more than a lot of orange paint and plastic plants. Nicholson goes on to argue that the look of Star Trek, its odd visual style, which includes the use of strong blocks of color, which he calls winding ways, that is, places where there are turnings and no direct route, for instance, of rocky, barren lands, foggy landscapes, caverns, places that are confusing or that lack markers, is integral both to Star Trek's meaning and its success. Similar strong blocks of color and winding ways appear throughout the works of Dr. Seuss, some of which have been sampled and reread for Boldly. A good remix like Boldly is not accidental. The mashed up works are chosen particularly to resonate and cannot simply be swapped out for another work. Star Trek mashed up with Peanuts would be a very different creation despite them being from the same era. Peanuts has a pop psychological vibe, and it deals with themes like anxiety, depression, and failure, which are very different from Star Trek's utopian idealism. Star Trek, in the style of Andy Warhol, would mean something else altogether. Owen Gallagher notes that in Remix, previously understood meanings of particular visual signs are altered and updated through recontextualization. The ability to recall the meaning of a specific visual sign and immediately understand its points to the fact that its meaning is stored in memory as a result of having been perceived in the past. However, in the case of a remix, previously perceived and understood signs are presented in a very different context, which causes a moment of realization in the viewer, during which comparisons are made between the old and new meanings, and a reinterpretation of the previously understood signs occurs. In other words, the intervention has to be visible to make it mean something. Similarity between the old work and the new work is not an accident. Boldly reevaluates the previously perceived through the pleasure of a good pun, giving the reader joy through hearing and understanding two meanings simultaneously. The audience re-sees the saucer shape of Dr. Seuss's cover as the famous saucer of Star Trek's iconic ship. It sees beloved Star Trek creatures like the Gorn, the Horta, and Tribbles drawn in the style of Seussian creatures. That remix integrates all of these creatures with their delightful names into one great alien 60s fantastic. It also argues that the sense of wonder and curiosity toward the strange that readers find in Dr. Seuss's work for children should continue into adulthood. Science and science fiction-loving adults believe strongly in cultivating and maintaining a sense of curiosity and wonder about the universe. They value optimism and international collaboration, both political, the United Federation of Planets, and scientific. This makes the audience reimagine Seuss's characters as the world's future explorers and scientists, reinscribing Seussian fantasy and fable into the real world of science and politics. The line of Who's of Dr. Seuss's Whoville, who hold hands and sing, is redrawn so as to not only include Starfleet officers in their gold, red, and blue uniforms, but also Vina, a green-skinned alien slave girl, and Christopher Pike, the disabled former Enterprise captain in his futuristic wheelchair. An original panel in Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas reflects the idea of community coming together around the Christmas tree to sing. In Boldly, that idea of community is extended in ways meaningful to Star Trek and science fiction fans. It is a vision of utopian international community of the future. The fact that Boldly does not rely solely on Go, but reworks and responds to individual drawings from 5 of Dr. Seuss's books is part of what makes it a good remix. There has been curation and careful artistic selection, just as DJs select samples and beats from the larger sea of music, and vidders select short clips out of the vast archive of television and film footage. The selection process is important. The remix is all about the editing. The imagery selected in Boldly invites the reader to reimagine Star Trek in the Dr. Seuss universe, drawing parallels between similar themes, storylines, and characters. Boldly primarily uses 3 kinds of images: 1, alien machines and landscapes; 2, depictions of flight; and 3, portrayals of community. All of these images are particularly resonant with Star Trek fans. Gerald and Templeton's expression focuses on the communal exploration of alien worlds, not on homebound mischief as in The Cat in the Hat, or on the isolated figure who walks down the new streets as in Go. From Go, Gerald and Templeton take only images of flight and then turn to other Seussian text to pull resonant images and reinterpret them. For instance, Sylvester McMoney McBean, who Seuss describes as a fix-it-up chappie, is reimagined as Scotty, the famously can-do chief engineer of the Enterprise. McBean's marvelously cobbled-together machine is reimagined as a Star Trek transporter. While McBean is a trickster figure whose machine enables endless status competition between Sneetches until he departs for greener pastures, Scotty constantly works last-minute engineering miracles on Star Trek. The audience sees McBean as Scotty and Scotty as McBean in a kind of visual pun, as there is also a commentary on the relevant ricketiness of Star Trek's mise-en-scène of cardboard control panels and colored lights. Star Trek's set and props were famously improvised. Wall decorations made of spray-painted styrofoam packaging, medical equipment made of salt and pepper shakers. See Stephen Whitfield and Gene Roddenberry, The Making of Star Trek 1986. In short, the behind-the-scenes world of Star Trek is made to evoke Dr. Seuss's cobbled-together steam pipes and blowing horns, and conversely, Boldly invites the reader to see those aspects of the Dr. Seuss universe as creative engineering. Similarly, the meeting of the north-going and south-going Zax is reimagined as Star Trek's iconic character Mr. Spock meeting his evil bearded doppelganger from Mirror Mirror in 1967, where the Zax argue endlessly, the Spocks battle in their own highly logical way through 3-dimensional chess. The story of the pointlessly fighting Zax also evokes a classical Star Trek theme, the narcissism of small differences. Though nearly identical in appearance and aim, the north-going Zax and the south-going Zax can't cooperate enough for either of them to succeed. For the Trekkie, this evokes Star Trek storylines like the race war between people whose faces are black on the left side and white on the right side, and those who are opposite. What a genius device to tell stories about racism, to tell the we hate each other for our differences story, and it's people who have half their face one color and half their face the other. What a genius mechanism. Absolutely freaking genius, Gene Roddenberry. Absolutely genius. On one hand, these disputes are silly. On the other hand, they are deadly serious. Mashing up Dr. Seuss in Star Trek highlights the way the latter uses fables, metaphors, and thought experiments to instigate ethical thinking, which is what we all loved about it so much, right? Like, that's what I loved about Star Trek: The Next Generation, was its ethical and moral way of it told the story to get to an ethical and moral point. Technology has allowed humans to share culture on a scale never before seen. Millions upon millions read the same books, hear the same music, watch the same movies. The sheer scale of distribution means works like Star Trek have become a shared cultural language. While fans of Star Trek and Dr. Seuss may get different meaning from the way in which the two universes intersect, their shared utopianism argues that mashing together Star Trek with Dr. Seuss contributes to a mutual culture of optimism and experimentation. By putting these two bodies of works into conversation, boldly, cleverly comments on both Star Trek and the works of Dr. Seuss, and it expresses new visual and thematic puns by comparing and contrasting them, boldly going where no mashup has gone before. Sorry, I've been building to that for a while now. All right, so then they argue that mashups generally constitute works of important transformative value. Mashups are works that generate new meaning through a combination of two or more original works, like the video in Seltzer or the collages in Carriou. Mashups transform original works by adding context, characters, imagery, and storylines from one work to another. They imbue original works with new expression or aesthetic, add commentary, insight, or humor, or reshape old narratives through new voices. The creative act of combining works tends to change the context of the originals, as the case at hand perfectly illustrates. Just as Green Day's video adds a religious theme to Scream Icon, boldly instills Go with Star Trek's themes of utopian optimism, human dignity, and scientific discovery and exploration. All right, we're going to start skipping a little bit here because we still have 18 pages to go, boldly. They talk about the history of mashups. Beginning in the Renaissance era, European classical composers such as Bach would weave refrains from secular, bawdy, popular tunes into sacred music in a composition known as a quodlibet. And there's various sources there. While quodlibets took many forms, the juxtaposition of the profane and the sacred was often done as a form of musical parody. In the United States, the practice of interweaving musical snippets became popular in early 20th century jazz music. Jazz musicians commonly riffed or improvised on variations of other songs in their own music. In later decades, musical sampling was integral to electronic, disco, and hip-hop music, becoming the most important technique of today's composers and songwriters. Musical mashups have received critical acclaim and widespread popularity. For example, Feed the Animals by Girl Talk, ranked number 4 on Time Magazine's top 10 album list of 2008. Yes, so in copyright class in law school back in 2011, 10 or 11, we talked about Greg Gillis and Girl Talk nonstop. Like, that was a almost daily topic, was why he hasn't been sued yet and what the standard is for mashups and transformation and fair use and all that. It was very educational, and I'm really actually grateful because that made some things that were dry very interesting because I could relate them to modern topics. A more recent YouTube mashup artist, DJ Earworm, has produced mashups of popular songs that have received over 25 million views. In the fine arts, mashups have been canonized as an art form in the form of collage, paper collages, bricolage, and more. First emerging as a revolutionary technique during the early 20th century, movements such as Cubism, Surrealism, Dadaism, and collage were provocative, reflecting disillusionment in politics, society, and culture through the fragmentation of original works. With the invention of digital technology, visual mashups took on new forms and meanings. Vids, for example, are fan-made music videos that combine footage from one or more visual media sources, typically as a form of commentary and criticism. Take one such vid, Vogue, by Luminosity DeVille. This vid takes footage of violence and suffering from the film 300 and sets it to Madonna's hit song, transforming the homoeroticism of the original into something blatant and ludicrous. Regardless of their medium, visual mashups are powerful forms of expression in the art world. Literary mashups are frequently seen in fan works, such as fan fiction, where writers bring together characters or storylines from different sources. Now remember, don't get that confused with just fan fiction that doesn't bring together different sources. And don't take this as legal advice that you can just go make your own Oh, the Places You'll Boldly Go without giving serious thought to making sure it falls under these rules. And remember that we're reading one side's brief. So this is a one-sided brief, and this is not a judge's evaluation of how to do a parody or mashup either. Often these works blend together well-known storylines, such as the mashup between Twilight and Harry Potter, which envisions Edward Cullen at Hogwarts. These mashups can be extremely popular and appeal to wide audiences. For example, as of September 2019, fanfiction.net, a website that allows individuals to post their own fan writings, contains over 47,000 mashups involving Harry Potter. Literary mashups have also been successful commercially. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, a reimagined version of Pride and Prejudice. I own a copy of this. With a zombie apocalypse storyline, reached number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list and was eventually turned into a movie. Mashups generate new meaning and cultural value for both creators and consumers. Mashups empower and educate new speakers. Many successful writers began their careers by creating mashups and other fan works. Mashups serve as an important expressive outlet for minorities. Requiring artists to seek permission before developing mashups would have a chilling effect. If every mashup artist had to receive permission, it's likely that many, if not most, would not be able to engage in their valuable craft. This is true. We get a lot of questions about parody, and most of the time when people find out how difficult it is to figure out parody, they decide to do something else. So it already has a chilling effect. Licensing is not a reasonable option for the average creator. In the music, film, and photography industries, licensing options are limited and likely would be prohibitively expensive. Nor is the chilling effect on mashups hypothetical. Music sampling declined in the 90s because of the high cost and difficulty of negotiating licenses, making it effectively impossible to create certain kinds of musical mashups, particularly those that used multiple samples. So if you had to pay for every single sample and you wanted to use hundreds of samples, well, maybe you just couldn't do that. Mashups enrich societies in a myriad of ways. I don't like that use of myriad. I'm going to rewrite it. Mashups enrich society in myriad ways. They serve as tools to generate new creative expression and empower communities who otherwise might feel they lack a voice. They have also become an integral technique across many genres of art. It is important to remove barriers, etc. Let's see. Application of the third and fourth factors. We finally get to it. We've got a few pages to go. Under the third fair use factor, transformative works are permitted to use more than the absolute minimum amount of copyrighted work possible. In assessing the third factor, the extent of permissible copying varies with the purpose and character of the use. This court has recognized that transformative works may permissibly use substantial or even verbatim copying of the original works to create new expression, meaning, or message. Identifying whether the work is transformative is only part of the third factor. A court must also consider the fourth factor in relation to the third. Once enough of the work has been taken to ensure identification, how much more is reasonable will depend on the likelihood that the work may serve as a market substitute. So long as the first and fourth factors favor the parodist, then the third factor has little weight. The district court was correct that when a work is transformative, as it found boldly to be, there is no presumption of market harm. Plaintiffs have conceded that they bear the burden of demonstrating market harm if this court finds, as the lower court has, that boldly is transformative. Applicable case law supports a paradigm in which, when a use is transformative, plaintiff must show by a preponderance of the evidence that a work like boldly is likely to harm the market. The market harm factor considers whether defendant's use would harm traditional, reasonable, or likely to be developed markets. This factor is not meant to encourage a finding of market harm on the syllogistic grounds that plaintiff could have licensed any fair use work. Many courts have warned against such circular reasoning in analyzing the fourth factor. What they mean is you're going to see, if you've looked at Dr. Seuss Enterprises arguments at all, because we've done a video or two on this, they're going to say, but we could have licensed Oh, the Places You'll Go to an author that wanted to make Oh, the Places You'll Boldly Go. Like, that would have been something where we would have licensed it. And so you're usurping our market because you didn't license it. Well, they could say that about any fair use. If Leonard French wanted to make criticism and commentary on it, they could say, well, you could have licensed your right to make criticism and commentary from us. We would have allowed you to do that. Well, that doesn't mean that I don't still have the right to make a fair use for free. Licensing poses a particular threat that the fair use analysis will become circular, and plaintiffs may not head off a defense of fair use by complaining that every potential licensing opportunity represents a potential market for the purposes of the fourth fair use factor. Courts must walk a careful line in analyzing this factor. The statute requires that they consider potential markets, but blanket consideration of all hypothetical harms undermines the fair use analysis. Although there are no clear guidelines for restraining excessively speculative market harm, case law offers some useful limits. Importantly, courts should adhere closely to the prevailing practice of accounting only for hypothetical markets that are likely to be developed. Accordingly, plaintiffs with clear policies against licensing a given category of uses should not be able to assert potential market harm. In this case, plaintiff instructed licensees not to use Seuss characters with third-party characters, suggesting that plaintiff, in fact, would not have licensed a Seuss mashup, such as Boldly. The market for such licenses was likely not to be developed. Additionally, the Second Circuit has suggested that the danger of circular reasoning is especially pronounced when a market is too narrowly defined. In the Swatch case, the court held that a potential market for audio recordings of earnings calls convened by foreign companies that are exempt from Regulation Ph.D., whatever that is, was too narrow to show market harm. Had Dr. Seuss Enterprises argued in the case at hand that they had a potential licensing market for Seuss Star Trek mashups, the court should have found that such a narrow market was unduly hypothetical. Likelihood of development and unreasonable narrowness are not the only limits that should be placed upon a market harm analysis. Nevertheless, courts should ensure that they are not establishing precedent that would restrict an overly broad category of legitimate transformative uses. And we're going to skip ahead a little bit here, see if there's anything. And that's the conclusion. So that's really interesting. I tried not to belabor that too much, but that was Public Knowledge's brief in support of Comic Mix, who are making the Oh, the Places You'll Boldly Go Star Trek and Dr. Seuss mashup, of which we're going to get our hands on a copy as soon as it's freaking available, because that just sounds awesome. Thank you very much to all of you for coming, all of you for watching. I am Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. Thank you very much to our channel sponsor in October. Joshua Davis from TandaPay has sponsored us. Thank you for the support. Thank you to our $50 plus supporters: Joe Tyson, Aspernari, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Eevi, Kyle Mudrak, Michael Pearce, Spirit Bear, Jan Negrey, Daniel Perez, Snorre Wisotzky, Blackleaf, and Benjamin Hitov. And thank you to the $5 plus supporters scrolling in front of me on the crawl. All of you are on the LED panel behind me and in the description of the videos below. Thank you very much for all your support as we take Brandon full-time. He's our full-time editor now, and we are looking forward to the channel growing with us, with him, and with you. So thank you for your support. I'm going to let you go. I'll see you in the videos that drop. I love you all. I'm Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. Bye.